Hello MMA community, my YouTube fans and all the subscribers and everybody who's going to be tuned in to find out what's going down on this Saturday's UFC card for UFC 255 Figueiredo versus Perez. Alright, what a good card. I'm actually very excited about this card. It's going to, for a casual fan, I can imagine it's probably not going to be the most exciting night to be watching fights on, but for somebody who's a really hardcore MMA fan, UFC fan especially, they would really appreciate this type of a card. And there's a lot of money to be made on this card, and we don't have to go about it by taking the usual risks that we would have to take, which if you're a member of the Patreon or a subscriber to my channel and you listen, you're a good listener, we usually don't take much risks, but even with those small risks on this card, it's not as much as your typical card because there's a lot of mismatches. There's a lot of wrong lines that the odd maker's given us to work with. So we're going to take advantage of every mistake they made, every mismatch on the card. Remember, because a lot of the influences, a lot of the matchmaking gets influenced not based off who's the best versus the best, second best, not about who's deserving. It's a lot to do with marketing, about favoritism. If somebody's now a hype train because they got on Dana White's good graces or the marketing machine's good graces, and Dana got a phone call from the president, who's his new friend now, and he wants to do a favor for somebody in power like a president of the country, and he wants to give his favorite new fighter now perfect matchup to go against somebody who will give him the second highlight reel in a row to brag about to his new friend. That's the types of matches we are capable of finding on these cards. So we're taking advantage of everything we can on this. The lines, the movements, the mismatches, you name it, we're on top of it. All right, let's start with, I also want to mention this is going to be the second half of the breakdown and picks for this card, so you do want to, if you missed the first half, go back and get the picks so we don't have to waste time going through them, although I will do a quick recap so you don't have to, if you don't need to listen to the breakdowns and how and who's and what and where, why, whens and hows and stuff, the 5 W's, you could just listen to the recap when I'm doing that. Alright, so here's where we're going to start with, I guess, for the night, just by randomly. We'll try to go with let me see if I could do a 2-for-1, 2 birds with 1 stone. All right, with Kyle Daukaus and the Brandon Moreno fights, they're kind of two of the same type of reasonings why we're going with the specific fighters that I'm deciding to go with. There, I can kind of give the same explanation for both of those picks, because here's the thing, okay? With baby assassin Moreno, who's fighting against a game opponent like Brandon Royval, who's known to pull upsets to beat people who are better than him in the past. Here's the difference on why I don't think this time he's going to pull the upset, and that he's rightfully the underdog fighting the number 2 guy, the number 2 seed of the division, who should be fighting for the championship, as we mentioned, but for political reasons and other reasons, he's not. They're going with somebody else who's on that card to fight the champion Figueiredo. But either way, it's still going to be a good matchup. It's a close fight. But the reason why I do like Perez, I've always thought he was like a baby assassin Moreno, Brandon Moreno, the better Brandon, the better half of this fight card, is for a few things. Like, here's what I noticed. Now, remember, this is the advantages of watching the fighting guru as opposed to the other gurus out there, because I see things that they'll never be able to catch if they didn't have fighting experience, especially not training experience. Here's what I used to teach my fighters, and I noticed Brandon Moreno does on his card, okay, on his fights, okay? This is the difference. A lot of people are saying Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval are very similar in a sense. They're both, they fight the same type of a way. They do. I agree with a lot of that. They're both gritty. They're both moving forward. They both use the same type of arsenals, but here's the difference. Okay, now Brandon Moreno, he's the type that when he gets position, and he does scramble really well, he knows how to get the top position, he's good at taking, he doesn't make mistakes. He's very well calculated. He's the kind of a guy that it's on automatic. He doesn't need to listen to his trainers. He's very experienced and very naturally good at fighting. It has a lot to do with a couple of different things. Number one, he's put the time in at the gym. He's rose up through the rankings for a good reason, because he's skilled. And that comes from years of training and training with good people and good trainers. And here's how I've noticed it. Like, for example, when somebody is hitting... Now, Brandon Royval, when he's gaining... when he's usually losing his fights until he's winning them. And the reason why he's losing a lot of times until he can find a way to win is because he's got to put himself in danger to capitalize on a mistake. The sense of comfort that he gives the opponent of his, who's been getting the better of the exchanges, who's been landing comfortably, is his advantage. So when they start to feel comfortable, not threatened by him, he finds a way to get them in some crazy choke and put them to sleep, or just get them so tired in a sense where now he can start picking up the pace. And a lot of his game plan relies on him taking damage, getting points working against him. The other guy he's fighting against, Moreno, his style is the opposite. He's very he could do the same things that the other Brandon can do, minus taking the damage. He's skilled enough. For example, if Royval lands on top of a guy and gets, I'm going to give you specifics, and this is going to go for the same thing. Hey, it's going to be the same thing with the Chris Daukaus and Stoltzfus, the new guy that's making his debut. How do you say his name? Chris Daukaus is going against. What the heck is that guy's name? He's a guy who's German. I'll talk a lot about that guy as well in a moment. Daukaus is going against Dustin Stoltzfus, who's a very similar type of a fighter. They have the same type of a record. If you look at it, they're a mixture between submissions and knockouts. They have a good, impressive record. Win-to-loss ratio is very similar. Experience similar. Different organizations, different level of competitions. So you got to give one the slightly better advantage, or more than a slight, in my opinion. But here, back to what I was saying. If Brandon Royval lands on top of a guy in the mount, somehow gets on mount on top of him, and he's trying to dish ground and pound down on his opponent, he's going to do it like this. He's going to need to look at his landing spots and keep his chin uncovered, and he's going to keep his eyes uncovered. That's why he takes damage. A lot of times he's going to need a cut man. He's going to need, but Baby, they call him Baby. I think one of his other nicknames is Babyface. He doesn't get touched much. Moreno, he wins fights unscathed, and he doesn't make mistakes, and he'll capitalize on your mistakes. The second you make them, you cannot afford to make a mistake against a guy like that, and here's why. He's not going to trade significant punches and give you the more significant punch like Royval would. What I've noticed, like, for example, if he's on top of you in the mount and he's putting shots down on you, he's doing it with his head all the way down. So while you're giving him punches back, if you decided to take that route rather than the smarter route, if you end up finding yourself underneath in the bottom of Brandon, see, if you're my fighter and I'm training you and you're fighting against Brandon Royval or Brandon Moreno, if you're underneath him, I would recommend trying to get off from the bottom and get back on your feet, and in the meantime cover up, because there's no point of trying to strike in a position where you're being dominated and controlled by Moreno, because Moreno, as he's dishing down the strikes, as he's hitting you and beating you up, he's also being defensive. And I'll show you, to the blind eye or to the normal person, they wouldn't think that he is doing anything special from the full mount while he's coming up, but he is. Every time his opponent throwing strikes back up at him, they're hitting him in the top of his head because he's pushing it down. He's punching like this. Now, Royval is more like, he thinks he's the better fighter. He's hitting him in a more accurate area, but he's also keeping himself available to be hit in an accurate area as well. That's why the fights are either split decisions or he'll be at the short end of a decision as very close, where the other guy, he won't have a close fight because you cannot get him, while he's hitting you significantly, you cannot get those hits. And here's what the difference is between keeping yourself open. When I'm training somebody, this is what I teach them. The top of your head, if you ever noticed, if you were ever a fighter, if you ever got into a fight in the streets, if you ever got hit on the top of your head, you're not going to feel it. For one, it won't damage you. You won't bleed. You won't get a bump. It won't be painful. And even worse so, The guy's hands, if he doesn't have gloves or wristband wraps, he's going to hurt his hand more than you would hurt the top of your head. It is a scientifically proven fact. The hardest part of the human body is the top of your head. So not only is the opponent not getting significant strikes by landing, but he's not doing damage. He's not hurting you. It's not going to be appearing, because the judges do look at damage done after the fight is over. Sometimes the guy who got the more strikes, if he didn't get the more damage, he could lose that fight. Moreno doesn't leave that option for the opponent. Royval does. Royval will not be naturally good at defending himself from hits, and that's why I said there's levels to this, and Moreno is number 2 and he's on a higher level. Skill-wise, unless he gets caught snoozing and he distracted or somehow, there's no way that 8 out of 9 out of 10 times he will not beat Brandon Royval, and the lines are way too close. They don't merit that, so there's value on Moreno. We should definitely, in my even opinion, if you knew what I knew, if you studied fights the way I study fights, nobody would ever tell you this, but he's a parlay piece even. And I'm telling you that he's just a way better fighter for many different reasons why I don't want to spend too much time on one fight. There's too many fights, but he's a comfortable pick of mine, no doubt about it. Moreno will beat Royval, and that's just one. If you tell me one thing about somebody, I'll tell you 10 more things that are better, but we don't have time for that. So he's the better, well-rounded fighter. He's the more better defensive fighter. He'll take the less damage, give the more damage. And same exact thing goes with Daukaus, who actually, Daukaus in another sense, he trains with a brother of his that's a heavyweight in the UFC. So when they train at home, when they're fighting back and forth, I know experience. When I train, and here's another person on the card who trains with somebody bigger and stronger in a different weight class. We'll talk about him later. Tim Means is going up against Mike Perry. Mike Perry's new camp. He's fighting and training alongside and sparring with the likes of Yoel Romero, statue of God, the guy who comes in, the only guy bigger than Costa, who gave Paulo Costa, very difficult time for 5 rounds. He went back and forth trading with that truck, that guy who hits like a truck, Paulo Costa, who besides his most recent performance, he was undefeated and he looked like the scariest man in the UFC. Well, that same Yoel Romero is the guy who Mike Perry's been wrestling with and training with. And take it from somebody who, when I was even a younger kid, when I was wrestling, I used to only wrestle the guys who were literally 2 or 3 times my size. And you know what? Although I'll admit that 9 out of 10 times, these guys used to throw me down to the ground and I could never score a takedown, or I would never be able. But guess what? That one time out of 10 times that I would get that guy down is the reason why when I fought someone my own size, when I fought somebody that's smaller than me, smaller than me, and which Tim Means will be smaller than Mike Perry, I was able to throw them around like a featherweight. Well, Chris Daukaus is that guy who trains with somebody who's way bigger than him and has been doing that since he was a kid. The Daukaus brothers is a fighting name family that they've been fighting since they were kids in all different aspects. That's why when he goes up against people his own size, his strength is going to be much more different than the normal person of that size. And he's actually going to be the bigger person here, longer. He knows how to use it. He's fought. If you look at the other guy's record that looks very impressive, like only 1 loss, if you dissect those opponents, you'll notice that although he's beating people with somewhat good records, like 8-7, or I'm sorry, 8-2, 9-1, if you look at their wins, those are all guys who have more losses than wins. So it really is a padded, fluffy record if you go further and further into it like I do. So the level of competition, he came from a league called We Love MMA. Has anybody heard of We Love MMA? I haven't. So obviously there's not a big, his training camp, the place he trains out of, there's no former champions that came out of there. Is that a phone? Sorry for the interruption, guys. So, yeah, anyways, the level of competition, the level of the experience of fight, everything is just a mismatch. So I got my money on Daukaus, but this could be something that I can see possibly, because the other guy's got good physical stature. He's going to be coming in good shape. He doesn't get tired. He's got good cardio. He's not chinny from what we can see. It could be one of those that goes over 2.5, but there's no need. If we put him in a safe parlay with some other guys, we probably don't need to take a prop bet on this. I want to focus prop bets more so on the way we do prop bets, and this is actually going to be more towards my patrons, I'll explain it. It's not designed for every single fight. It's going to be designed towards the ones that are like, for example, the Shevchenko fight is minus 1,300. So unless you want to put $1,300 to win $100 and hope, and hope that nothing weird happens and she loses and you lost that big pot of money to win the small pot of money, I found you guys a way to. I realized that the Brazilian girl she's fighting against, Jennifer Maia, has in the last 10 years never been submitted or knocked out. So being that Shevchenko, she's fought against people who needed to take her head off and beat her decisively because she was winning fights mostly. She does have a better winning record than a losing record. So the people that she's used to fighting against, that she's never been knocked out against, unlike Shevchenko, who's the champion, doesn't need to do anything risky and dangerous to put herself in a bad position, and she doesn't have to impress anybody. She's already known as the GOAT. She's already the champion. She won't be doing as many attempts of trying to take Jennifer out as her previous opponents in the last 10 years have been. So I do see this going to the decisions. Like even Katlyn Chookagian, who's, as you can see, somebody who was finished in the first round against Jessica Andrade, the way smaller person, took Shevchenko to the third round or fifth round, whatever. It was the last round of their fight before she barely got the finish. So someone like Maia, I could see going in, and that's paying plus money. So instead of putting $1,300 to get $100, I found you guys a way to get $200 back for just $100 instead of $1,300. So that's what the design of props are meant for, more so. And also another way is to sprinkle like 10, 20 bucks just to win $80, $90, because we can afford, when we're doing so good on the regular bets, the small parlays, the single bets, the favorites, the underdogs, we can afford to put a little bit of risks on those types of bets. But other than that, that's it. We're not going to be greedy. That's why, again, being a patron, you get to see my own personal bet slips. That there's a beautiful system behind the madness, and it's been mastered at this point. So that's the benefit of paying a small amount to be a member. That pays off in dividends even on your first night of betting. So worth it to look into that if I was you. Next fight. So we did 2 for 1 there. We got Kyle Daukaus, the brother of Chris Daukaus, who's been very impressive in the heavyweight division in the UFC. And also we got baby assassin Brandon Moreno beating Brandon Royval. So don't get the Brandons confused. We got baby assassin, the favorite, the number 2, not the number whatever guy, to win that fight, and also Kyle Daukaus. The next fight, we're going to talk about Daniel Rodriguez versus the other guy, what's his name? Daniel Rodriguez is fighting against Nicolas Dalby. Dalby's somebody I was impressed by when I watched his tapes. He's a former interim champion in his previous fighting organizations, so he does have a pretty good, and he has fought decent competition as well. He's actually fought against Houston Ross, who was undefeated until his recent loss against Michael Page. But if you ask me, I don't know if you guys watched that fight, Houston Ross, who was undefeated going into the Michael Venom Page fight in Bellator, he beat the crap out of Michael Page until the last round, where he actually let out a little bit. And I would have too, because after beating somebody to even the first round, I could say was a 10-8 round. I don't know if I can't remember if they scored it a 10-8 round, but they should have if they didn't. But again, the marketing machines have a mind of their own. So Houston Ross, who got a 10-8 round and almost another 10-8 round, but it wasn't as much of a difference in performances between him and Michael Venom Page, but he did by far beat Michael Venom Page the second round as well by a huge landslide in numbers and control time. More importantly, he controlled him like 90% of the fight against the cage or on the floor. By some miracle, they still gave him his first loss, and they gave the split decision to Michael Venom Page. That's why I'm not comfortable. That's why I tell you guys I don't feel comfortable putting money on Bellator. It was an embarrassment to the sport to give Houston Ross his first loss to a guy who did nothing. You couldn't even argue that he shouldn't have got 10-8'd in the first round, and you couldn't argue that he didn't lose decisively the second round. And if he didn't knock him out, if it had to go to the scorecards, so you didn't get a knockout or a submission, how did you win the fight? And the third round was very competitive. It's not like some would even argue Houston won that one as well, but he did more stuff. Just like the Kay Hansen and the Corey McKinney fight. Corey McKinney was doing a little bit more in the last round, but she still didn't win the fight. But they robbed Case. Whatever. No sense of talking about it. It's done now. But we fixed the system, so we don't have to worry about that. Those are the fights we'll target when we know that somebody's not proven and they like to go to the decisions a lot. We'll find prop bets and ways where we can cash in no matter. Like the Ronda Marcos, we did that. We didn't bet on either one of them, but we bet on the over 2.5, and we cashed in on that. We even put it in a parlay and cashed in. Anyways, back to the fight. I got Daniel Rodriguez. The reason I picked Rodriguez is not just because he's proven himself. He got a chin against Dwight Grant, who's a guy that hits like a truck. He not only got rocked by this guy and took a hit and showed us that he could take a hit and keep coming, in the same round, in the same minute that he got almost put away and that 9 out of 10 people would have gotten slept by that same exact punch, he was able to come back, battle through the adversity, and put away Dwight Grant in the same round, knock Dwight Grant out, who's a durable guy himself. So besides that, he trains at jiu-jitsu. He's got just as much almost submissions under his belt as he does in knockouts. His boxing, his footwork, he's very light, good boxing, maneuvering. He knows how to avoid getting hit sometimes. And if he does get hit, he knows how to not ball. He's not the type that would ball up, and he knows how to make you pay for. He knows how to make you pay for landing any type of kick or punch on him. So he's good in winning the decision by adding points on top of points. He's good at the ground. He trains with Eddie Bravo, 10th Planet Gym, guys like who taught Tony Ferguson how to do the Kamara roll, whatever they call that, the roll thing that he did that he puts people out with. So he's got his ground game, he's got a boxing game, and overall he should be undefeated. His only loss that was years ago came by split decision. One judge even gave him the win, so he could, some would argue, say still be undefeated, but he's a very impressive guy all around, and I like him. And the thing about it I don't understand is, I don't know who he's pissed off at the UFC, but they keep giving this guy bad matchups, and he still pulls through those adversities. Like they put him matched up with Kevin Holland. Before that, somebody else, I forgot. But I don't know who he made mad or his managers made mad, but for the first time, they finally kind of gave him somebody who's not going to be as big of a threat as the past matchups that they gave him, that he still pulled through. So I don't see him having problems here. And even though the line is a little bit wide, I would say, I do see him edging this one out. Maybe not by knockout, though, but I do see him getting at least a unanimous decision, maybe split decision, depending the way the judge has been these days. You never know, but I do see him pulling it through one way or another. Now we're going to move on to the next fight. We've got Jared Gordon against, remember, by the way, this is no order. I'm just going down the list, whoever's name catches my eyes first. Jared Gordon's been trying to get into the UFC for the longest time. He's just had so much bad luck between injuries and just other contract issues, whatever it was, that got him to finally. But he's still young. He's in his part, everything happens for a reason. I think that this is the best time he's developed his game. I noticed in recent fights he's shown very good IQ. He doesn't go, like when he's knocked someone down 4 or 5 times in the fight, he doesn't take advantage of them being on the ground and go into a world where he's not going to have the bigger advantage. Even though there's no knockdown rule, he still made the referee let the guy back up and ended up fighting back into where he's got the advantage over the opponent. And so that shows good IQ. He's very forward pressure. Alan Jouban is not the type of a guy who's proven himself to have a good chin. So if this guy puts enough pressure on him, he's either going to have to keep backing up, which is not going to look good in the scorecards, or he's going to have to try to defend himself by opening up with his own strikes. And he's not really a power puncher or type of a hitter, so unless he cuts him with like some elbows and stuff, which this guy will be happy to take, he's built like a tank. And so if he opens up to try to strike him instead of moving backwards and avoiding the fight, which will make him lose at the decisions scorecards, he's going to have to open up and take some punches. He's going to take some shots from a guy who hits like a truck. And that's why this guy's been finished. Alan Jouban, the more skilled, technically on paper, he's got more skill sets. He's got the longer, more impressive resume, whatever. Actually, not even the record. The other guy's got the better record. He's got 17 wins, only 4 losses. So he's got more wins, less losses, more finishes. The guy, Alan, the UFC veteran, Alan Jouban, he's a black belt. He's got 0 submissions on his entire career. So not a threat to this guy. This guy's gonna. I have no problems going through him, and he may have some problems because he's not the most technical guy, but his pressure, his gritty toughness, and ability to keep going and throwing his strikes and eventually have to land some of those, and one of those that will be able to put the lights on Jouban, or just put him in a position where he's trying to avoid the fight so much that he loses in the scorecards one way or another. He's the underdog, so anytime a fight's not going to be a mismatch, I definitely want to put my money on the plus side. So I got my money on Jared Gordon on this guy on this card, because also you guys got to see Jouban is also got 1 foot out the door. He's a commentator now. He's doing podcasts with another girl that works for the UFC. So he's focused on a lot of things other than fighting. And that's why between that and the injuries, he's taking a lot of time off. He's going to come back rusty. And his last 5 or 6 losses, out of his last 5 or 6 losses, I think 4 or 5 of them were by finishes. He's got finished by TKOs or submissions, Gunnar Nelsons, and people that are not the most they're not like top 3, top 5 guys, and they're still putting him away. So I don't think this guy's going to have a problem. He used to be a champion in his old organization, so he's not a bum. He's not a can. All right, next pick. Cynthia Calvillo versus perfect timing. Chookagian's another one. Katlyn lost against the girl who was fighting in that weight class for the first time. Jessica Andrade, the way smaller, shorter, smaller girl moving up a weight class, finished her with 1 strike to the stomach in the first round. And Chookagian's never been somebody. It was another black belt that has never shown black belt level skill sets. So I don't see her now that she's even been hinting towards retirement. Also talking about starting her family now and not being a full-time fighter like she used to be and stuff like that. More reason why she trains with people that are not. I think Shayna Dobson is one of her main training partners, and just that tells you all about the level that she's on right now. And you know, Shayna Dobson, I'm not saying anything bad about it, but she's not the more she's found success in her career just by being strong and taking adversity and still going forward, not because she's so skilled. So for this fight, I have definitely Cynthia Calvillo. It was a good parlay piece all around. I think she's a stronger, better cardio. She'll want it more. She's only got 1 loss on her entire record. She's only lost against former champion Carla Esparza. She was an excellent wrestler. That's why she was giving her problems. And she was, the Cookie Monster was a former champion at that time. She was in her prime when she lost to Cookie Monster. Was in her prime when she beat Cynthia Calvillo. So since then, she's looked very impressive. And unlike Chookagian, who's on the decline, I see her getting better and better. So I got my money on Calvillo. And the next one, we'll say for the co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko. We've talked about already. I see her getting the win. But because you don't want to bet minus 1,300 and growing on her, you could look into the prop bet, but don't parlay it. Because she is, if Maia gets desperate to try to beat her, because she will get outpointed, outclassed by the GOAT, Shevchenko, the Bullet. She may get desperate and open herself up to getting taken out by some crazy head kick, like a Jean-Claude Van Damme tornado kick or something. And Shevchenko does punish people. She's very good at, like, when people are trying to eat up her leg, her lead leg. If they're trying to chop it up, she does like a spinning back kick that's very accurate. So she's dangerous in all aspects. She's got good ground game, ground takedown defense. She's got good submissions. You see how she put Katlyn Chookagian, when she fought after beating her sister. She fought with her, or before beating her sister, I can't remember, who's also on this card, by the way, we'll talk about. She put her in a crucifix that was impossible to cover up against her strike. So her level, her accuracy, her IQ, her everything is just so impressive. That's why she's the GOAT. Her only loss in like the last decade was against Amanda Nunes, who was way stronger and bigger and it was a split decision. So one judge even said that she won, so you can argue she's still undefeated. She's been undefeated besides Amanda Nunes, who's the next person you could talk about being the GOAT for women's. So she's only lost against literally the best, second best, or some would argue the first best after her. And so that's why she's a good piece, but that's why she's also the biggest favorite. All right, next one. We're going to talk about now Paul Craig versus Shogun. This is part 2. Shogun, if I'm not mistaken, it was a draw, or did he lose? Let me see this one. Anyways, I'll give you guys my pick. Because this is going to be a close fight, like I imagined the last one. He won by split decision, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check here. Craig beat him the first time, and Shogun's not getting any younger. He's in his... If you remember his last showcase, I did win a lot of money on Shogun. He was my biggest bet of the night because of the same reason why I'm going to have to fade him this week. He fought against somebody who was way beyond his prime, should have been retired. Nogueira, he was 44 years old, 45 years old, so I put like $1,200, and I never bet that much besides if you're Benil Dairouche or somebody, like a Vincente Luque versus, I forgot who he fought last time. I put that much money on him as a single bet. Anyways, so I won a lot of money on him, but this time I'm going to have to fade him because Craig has 13 wins and all 13 by finish. 1 TKO, 11 or 12 submissions, and he's still in his prime in a way. He's very impressive. If you don't go to... This is the guy who gave Ankalaev his only loss, and he did it within seconds left of the last round. So this is and he does this in a lot of his fights. You know how many... This is the third... This guy's in his 12 wins, 3 of those wins were people who were undefeated. An impressive undefeated guys. Carl Moore was 5-0 when he lost by submission to Craig, and he was winning that fight until he lost. So this is what I call it. When I tell my friends to bet on Paul Craig, I don't tell them bet on Paul Craig. I say bet on the live betting cow machine, the live betting cow machine. This guy is the best guy. If live betting was invented for guys like Paul Craig, this is the other advantage you have, because I'm not just a fighting expert who can incorporate reasons and why you should be comfortable on the fights that people are torn between who's the better guy and who to pick. I can see them as clear as night and day, but another advantage is I know how to bet it better than anybody else will ever be able to tell you, because this guy's the best. He doesn't win fights from pillar to post, from bell to bell. He's usually losing the fight until he wins it, because he knows he can finish these guys. He's on a different level. So in this case, though, it may not be the best time to live bet him, because being as old as Shogun is, and the guy is not a bad striker. He just chooses to go to the ground. He'll pull guard sometimes and lose control time. And so it'll look like he's losing the fight when he's really not, because he knows what he's doing. Down there, he's hitting the guys with elbows and significant strikes, just like that Dana White Contender Series main event I told you guys about it last week, where the guy was going to probably win off his back. This is no different. He's the same type of a style fighter. It was Souza who beat the undefeated guy who was the favorite that I told you was going to lose. Same type of a style matchup. This Paul Craig guy will show you. Same type of victory. He could do it off his back or against Shogun, who I'm a big fan of. I love Shogun. I grew up watching him, and I always admired him and his toughness and his skill set. But at his age, he's not supposed to still be fighting against these guys. So he should be in either a different organization, should be retired in my opinion. But if not, they should make it like a league for legends or veterans like himself, or just like the way you have weight classes, maybe an age group class. I don't know, but he had trouble with Nogueira. Nogueira's way older than him. He's 45 years old. Nogueira I was sweating when I put all that money on him. He went from, I remember the live betting numbers went from him being -110, like one of the biggest favorites of the night, to being an underdog. He started losing the fight. He became the underdog. Nogueira became the favorite. If you live bet on that fight, you went from the biggest favorite of the night to being an underdog. Another one was Paul Craig. Can you imagine what the numbers were like when Ankalaev was winning decisively in 3 rounds, all 3 rounds winning, and then, like, let's say 1 minute left of the third and final round? What would you have gotten Paul Craig for? Probably minus, I'm sorry, plus 5,000 you would have got Paul Craig for. So just keep that in mind. He's a live betting cow machine for a reason, and he beat him. So if he could do that to the best guy in the division, the undefeated guy who's probably going to be a future champion now that John Jones stepped down, he's the guy he just impressively put out for the second time, beat Ian Kutaleba. That guy's a force to be reckoned with. Craig took him down, took him out with 1 second left in the last round. So that shows nobody, he didn't get lucky. He does that in all his fights. Anyways, next fight. Joaquin Buckley. This is the new Khamzat for Dana. Khamzat's one of Dana's pets. Well, now he's got to make room for the next guy who's going to be the Dana's. That's why Dana gave him a second bonus. He gave him I've never seen him do that to anybody. When he did that real kick and beat the undefeated prospect who people were high on, the big favorite, Impa Casagne, who he defeated as an underdog on that night recently, not too long ago, with that highlight reel that went viral that even the president was talking about to Dana. For that reason, Dana White is now high on him, and he's given him and his best friend, the matchmaker, are giving him a gimme fight. Somebody who's got an undefeated, impressive record against all cans, guys who've never even won a fight in their life. And then recently he got a lucky doctor stoppage. Talk about luck. This guy should play the lottery. Not only was he losing the fight being controlled against the cage by an opponent who the doctors had to get off of him against the cage in the first round. They stopped the fight because of a cut over the eye against Villanueva. But then another fight in the Dana White Contender Series, he got knocked out and lost, but because they found weed. Mind you, weed is not an enhancement it's not a PED that you can get enhancements. If anything, it's a disadvantage. Your eyes will be half shut, you'll be distracted thinking about food and munchies, and you're going to be tired. And they used that as a reason to turn the decision from knockout to giving him the win. They didn't even make it a no contest. They made it a win. So somebody's been showing this guy a lot of love. Jordan Wright, his record is not the way it should be. If he was fighting in the UFC, if those unlucky things weren't happening to his opponents, he would be maybe 7-5 right now. That's his real record, what it should be if he was fighting real competition and those lucky things weren't happening to him. And now he's fighting a Joaquin Buckley. This guy's the real deal. He's not some guy that gets lucky. He's not some guy who's a low-level competition. This guy has fought with the best of the best. I mean, yeah, he's lost to some of them, but he's not somebody who's going to be easy. He's built like a tank. He's now got momentum on his side. He's got the marketing machine behind him. He's going to be more motivated than ever. So he's training with some good people, I heard now. He's just recently switched. So I'm putting my money on, and if you want to, because he's a good size favorite. He's not too, there's the value there if you put enough money on him or parlay him. But another way you could get him is by because what I did notice also about Jordan Wright, even while he was beating cans, before the bell saved him a couple of times, if those cans ever laid a finger on him, with all due respect, I'm a very open guy. I have nothing against anybody. I'm not racist. I'm not sexist. If you're black, you're white, you're orange, you're yellow, you're gay, you're not, you're straight. I love everybody equally. But in my opinion, like, he's afraid to get hit, man. This guy shows signs of almost like being a girl. Like when I seen him get a few times put against the corner, it reminded me of like when I see girls fighting that don't want to get, like I've seen a girl tap out to strikes. I would not be surprised if this guy tapped out to strikes. He does not like getting hit. He put against the cage. He didn't even get hit, but as the guy was starting to get some lucky strikes, he balled up before even getting hit. So before the damage was done, he showed signs of not being able to take hits. He balled up and covered up. He put himself in a shell position so he doesn't get hit until the bell saved him. That's not a guy you want against Joaquin Buckley. There's levels to striking and MMA. This guy's on a different level. So for that reason, I could see this going inside the distance. I would put my money on him as a straight bet money line, but I would also find a way to incorporate a prop bet for Joaquin Buckley getting his second highlight reel knockout. If the guy doesn't just pretend to fall down and play possum and pretend like he got knocked out to avoid the punches, because He's not the type that really wants to take any strikes. I can tell you that now. He's not the fighting type. So, all right, back to the next fight now. We're at, where are we now? I think I'm almost done here. Because remember, we did the Louis Cosce. Been impressed with Dana White, the Cosce brother, another guy. It's a lot of brothers and sisters. You got Valentina and the Bullet, 2 sisters on the card. We got Daukaus, who fights in the UFC, who's got a brother in the UFC. Now we got another guy who has a brother who's a fighter. Who's very impressed. This guy finishes. This is another prop bet I'll be giving my patrons around fight night. So, but I got easy decision, easy fight to call here. I got my money on another mismatch for this card. I'm gonna put my money on Cosce to win against. They've matched him with Sasha, Palatnikov. I'm very bad with these names, but anyways, Sasha. We'll just call him Sasha. He was a champion in one of his older organizations, so he's not a bad fighter. Don't get me wrong, but this guy is just going to be on a different level than him. And like Louis Cosce, let's talk. Like, let me give you an example of how good this guy is. The only guy that was able to, the other guy who's on this fight card who we talked high, everybody's high on, Daniel Rodriguez, one of the biggest favorites of this card. The only loss that he has, that I told you he went to a split decision with somebody some years back, was against, what's that guy's name? Victor Reina. Victor Reina is the only guy who could say he beat Daniel Rodriguez. Well, on the Dana White Contender Series card, Louis Cosce knocked him out in 1 minute of the first round in the Dana White show, and he's still undefeated. He's got 7-0 record just professionally. I think he's got even a better record if you count his amateur career. He's even got more than 7 wins and no losses. So very impressive guy. Very high. Is a great parlay piece. Out of his 7 wins, 5 are knockout, 2 are submission. He's never let it go to the decisions. That's why I say he's a good parlay piece. That's another reason. Remember, my new system has implemented this type of logic behind it, where I'm incorporating more so not just the guys who I know are way better, mismatches, good value, but who are not going to depend on the scorecards. So we got Louis Cosce, nicknamed the Monster for a reason, coming off some impressive wins. Victor Reina's got a loss. Daniel Rodriguez, who's got a loss against Victor Reina, is who Louis Cosce has recently also defeated, amongst some other guys who's fallen victim to his power by getting knocked out. Let me see, 1, 2, 3. Last 3 fights were knockouts in the first round. Before that, it was a submission. So all 7 of his victories that he's finished these opponents were all in the first round. None of them went more than 2 minutes, besides 2 of them. And that was one of them was like in his first or second fight only. The rest of them were all under 2 minutes of the first round. So that's even more impressive. So anyways, you got another lock of the night right there, and as well as Joaquin, Buckley, and some more. But again, you got to be a patron to get these. The patrons will know who's the most confident picks, who to parlay, who to straight bet, which prop bets, over, unders. Pay that small amount, man. If you guys haven't paid it already, you should know by now that there's a reason why you got to be a member of this. You got advantages. Here's another thing I'm going to throw in for you guys before I leave you guys with all your picks to make some money for this weekend. I'm going to give you guys a tip, a boxing tip, okay? Like if you guys are my students. If anytime you're getting in a position where, like, let's say you're at a bar or you're at a restaurant and some guy is being a drunk, he wants to mess with you or try to pick a fight with you, and you got to defend yourself or your family or somebody. And you know that if you have to, sometimes you got to, unless you're in the law is funny. Unless you're in your house, besides if you're inside your house, which a lot of times you're in a situation the same way as if you were in your house, but you could be eating at a restaurant with your family. If somebody invades your space, your private space, your personal space, and you feel like your family is threatened, the law, unfortunately, will only protect you, and you will not go to jail only if that person hits you first. So you have to now make a decision as a law-abiding citizen. I got to make the decision as I don't want to go to jail, or I want to protect my family. Because in the house, if somebody breaks in your house, you can shoot them first, as long as it's not from their back while they're running away. If you shoot a guy who's in your house because you felt threatened, even if they didn't shoot you first or hit you because they're in your house, you won't go to jail. That's still defending your family and whatever. But unfortunately, that law doesn't work for you outside your house. So let me give you some tips. You tell the tough guy, the drunk who's at the bar trying to hit on your wife or trying to steal your food or picking a fight on you, and you don't know if he's got a weapon. Hey, guy, I'll tell you what. I'll let you get the first punch, okay? Now you're this tough guy, this bully is getting his ego. You're being the first to hit him, not physically. You're hitting his ego. You're telling him, "I'll give you the first shot." Now you're insulting his manhood by saying that I could take your shot, which is going to encourage him to do what he was going to probably do anyways. So you're going to be prepared. What you're going to do is what I tried to tell you earlier, like for example, Brandon Moreno was doing. You're going to tell him, "I'm going to take your best shot. Go ahead, give it to me, like point at your nose or point at your eyes. But right before he hits you, you put your head down, you let him hit you at the top of your head, the hardest part of your body. And then now, legally, you can do anything you want to this guy. There's going to be witnesses to say he hit you first. You kill him, you don't kill him, I'm sorry, it's a figure of speech. You beat him to bloody pulp, and it'll be justified. You won't go to jail, and you hurt his hand, because his hand will probably, if he hits like a man as hard as he could, you're going to break his hand without even getting a scratch on you. You got a tip that costs more than $10. Sign up in the Patreon. See you on the next video. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, the reminders, and all that good stuff. See you on the next video, guys. We got a lot to talk about.